Yo guys, this manhwa is going to be absolutely awesome, so make sure to sit back, relax, and enjoy this recap. The chapter starts in a dark and gloomy world, and we see somebody who is literally stabbed into a pillar. He yells out for help, and he coughs out blood, and he says, "Just do it already." And as he looks up, there is a terrifying image of an absolute demon deity, and of course it has 8 arms, and it goes to kill him with its foot. Boom. He dies. He was the S rank. And of course now, they are going to be filled with endless despair and fear. We then see he is on the phone, of course, and he wakes up mentioning that was another bad ending. He then says, "You should thank me, your one and only reader." And of course he tosses his phone into his bed as he goes and takes a piss. We then hear merging worlds begin. The next day, our boy is looking fresh in his uniform, and he says, what the heck? He notices that, of course, his school has disappeared. He wonders what exactly this is, but the people around him are complaining because, of course, they call the real estate company a piece of trash, and also that they are demolishing houses. He then says to himself, to have the ability to demolish an entire crappy building in one night, are the construction standards way too high now? Just as he enters class 16, we see a monster come after him. Oh crap, never mind, it's just his boy. And he says, "Chang Ting, the end of the world is coming." Of course he asks, "Did you game all night yesterday?" And his friend says, "Yup, and come, I'm telling you the truth actually, look at these posts." And then we see an image right here, and everybody is talking about, hey, brothers, do you all really think that you can raise down a building in one night? And I'm guessing that this is a big thing. He then folds his arm and says, "Do you see that? There are reports of buildings everywhere disappearing overnight." But our MC says, it gotta be a coincidence or something. He then tells our MC, "Do you really think with the current situation, it sounds like a lot like the omens of a monster attack?" And this dude definitely been reading too much manhwa. We then see an image of somebody fighting an abyssal monster. As we see it right here, it looks absolutely scary, and it even has horns coming out of his cheekbones. We see the guy and he says, calm down, and it is a time to kill it with a single bow. It then dashes at him furiously, and he manages to jump away from the spot that he was, and he stabs it with a spear. And we see the blood come out, which is actually not ordinary blood, it's sort of black and red. Of course, he says, "I did it," as the wolf squirms in anguish, and he looks at it on the ground and he wonders if it is truly dead. He says, "That's not it. It should drop an abyssal stone, right? And the first kill reward isn't showing up, so that means that it's still alive." He then says, "Welp, there's no use playing dead in front of me, you mutt, and just stay dead." Of course, it then lets out a howl, and it begins to literally dissipate into the air, and a dagger and an orb comes up from the body. He then says to himself, "Wow, what is this?" And we get a system notification. "Congratulations, human. You have acquired Soul of the Lone Wolf as a reward for the first kill." And he says very excitedly, like, "Let's go." And it reminds me sort of Deku from My Hero Academia. Of course, he then looks at the system, and we hear, "Use Soul of the Lone Wolf?" He clicks yes, and he starts to get surrounded by the wolf's aura. Oh gosh. He then yells out like he's going Super Saiyan, and we see the black and red aura come inside of him. And we see him right here, and his eyes look very beautiful like it's Gojo. We see that it has 2 effects. One, of course, to improve the physical strength by 10 times, and the second one is pretty much enhancing your reflexes as well. He wonders if it is finally over, and he goes to punch the ground really quickly, and he notices that he didn't even get hurt at all, not even a single scratch. He then loads up all of his power once again to literally destroy the ground, and we see a huge explosion, and we see a big hole and a crater from his fist, and of course he says, "That's crazy, I'm super strong now." Of course, he then grabs the abyssal stone and puts it in his mouth, and then we hear, is this a system's ability? We now know that he is at level 1, and he can store non-living objects and preserve them. He then says, "So this is like an inventory in Minecraft, huh?" And so of course he says, yeah, whatever. He then gets the Sword of the Hunting Deity, which is level 1, and it gives him body enhancement ×2, and it also lacerates a bleeding attack, and this is really good. He mentions to himself, there's also a continuous bleeding effect on the enemy. He then smiles and mentions he's probably the only person in the world who read this novel and knows what's going to happen. And I guess that's a benefit of reading manhwa. He then has a sword in his hand as he looks very optimistic. He says the second stage will happen in 3 days, and I'm looking forward to what I'll be rewarded with. Oh yes guys, we are back in school and we see everybody chattering and we see this guy with his phone and we hear Sota-kyun and his best friend jumps again but he misses and hits the ground. This guy really is funny. He then asks our MC, something's changed about you, what exactly is it? And he says, well, as he turns away, he doesn't want to get exposed guys, he says, yeah, it's nothing. Of course, our best friend of our MC says, did you see the news that monsters appeared all around the world? And he brings out his phone and he mentions, but for some strange reason, if you upload a picture of the monsters, you get suspended. But he managed to save a video of it as we see a big buff dude take care of this big wolf. He says this foreigner is a part of the special forces, and of course, he managed to defeat one. He then says, with his red eyes, this guy looks pretty cool as well. He says, do you know what happened when he defeated the monster? Well, he obtained a reward, and he shakes our MC saying, it's a superpower. He obtained a lightning ability. Our MC then pushes him off and says, yeah, that's cool, because his friend wants to go ahead and fight these monsters, but let's see if he can last. The teacher walks in and she says, regarding the particularly abundant false rumors going around, please be cautious of the internet, but they all know that this is a lie. Our MC mentions in 3 days they won't call these false rumors anymore, and yellow hair boy just says to him, Sota, you must be, and of course our MC is relieved that the class is over, and his best friend says, come over here, I have something to ask you. He then puts his head around his back like he is some sort of anime villain or drill sergeant, and he says, you have something to tell me, do you? He then says, how should I tell you this? And of course, he begins to run away and he says, I'm breaking up with you, Sota. Oh gosh, this guy really is too funny. With tears flowing from his eyes, he says, I thought we were friends. Was it just me? I believed in you. But our MC mentioned Taketo, which is his name. He says, you have to promise me you won't tell anyone about this. And his best friend says, yeah, you got it. He says, don't blink, just watch. And he flicks the ground or the stair and it literally gets sent flying the piece of stone. And of course, Taketo is like, yo, what the heck? Are you kidding me? He mentions, I got this power after I defeated a monster. And Taketo grabs onto Sota's arm. And then there's a lady watching like, ugh, are they really flirting in school? She gives a disgusting look and of course she doesn't know what's happening. Our MC mentions in 3 days the monsters will appear again, and when that happens, I'll help you to get a skill too, Taketo. He then says with his blue awesome eyes, in exchange, this is a secret between us two, and of course they're going to help save the world. Our MC is walking, and he mentions that the next appearance of Deep Abyss is around 30 kilometers away, and is also in the middle of an abandoned construction site. And I'm guessing he's going to go there right now. He then wonders that this one will be a little bit different, because of course the two monsters will appear at the same time. He says one of them of course is an abyss monster that looks kind of like a monkey as we see it here, and it's going to be fast with sharp claws. But of course because of this, the defensive abilities shouldn't be much different from a baby monkey on Earth. He says the other one though, oh gosh, it is an abyssal monster like a gorilla. And of course, it's super slow, its attack and defensive powers are super strong. And look at this gorilla here, this just looks super furious. He mentions, but the current me surpasses both of them in physical strength and speed, so we should be able to instantly eliminate one, and then of course get the other. He then hears, Sota-kun, and it seems to be a lady. This is his auntie. And she says, are you returning home from school? Do you want to have dinner at my house? He then says, could it be that uncle is at my house again? She says, it's impossible to hide things from you. You know our uncle has been claiming ownership over you and your father's house this whole time, right? He then tells his auntie as he hugs her and makes her feel comforted, Auntie, I'll accept your consideration, but I can protect myself. He then leaves, and of course his auntie says, even though he's having a hard time, he is such a strong child. We then see we are inside of the room, and of course we see somebody drinking his life away. He says, because I inherited the rights, this house is mine, and they already made a mess. Our MC then steps in, and then he says, you can come to my house whenever you want, but you're insane for thinking you can mess it up as you please. And we see his look here, and this isn't a good one. One of them then says, don't get ahead of yourself, you're just a brat. But then of course, it seems to be that it is his uncle's son, and this uncle goes up and says, Sota, you're still a kid. Your mom actually got along with me, and so of course this is mine. He says, you'll be living by yourself, so you should experience what it's like to live alone in advance. And this uncle doesn't know what's coming for him. He then says, here's some pocket money, 1,000 yen from your very grateful and gratuitous uncle. He then says, the son, why are you still standing? Get your belongings and get out of this house. But then our MC responds, the one who should leave are you guys. I know that you forged that will. And it seems like, of course, they are frauds. He then says, as we see the absolutely messy house with tissue paper, wine bags, and just bottles of wine scattered. He says, you never came to help mom and dad when they were having a hard time. Not even my dad was hospitalized, and mom was trying my best for him. He says, people like you are absolutely useless trash. And oh gosh, his uncle folds his arms and he says, no matter how much you protest, the one with the will is me. So take it to court or, just leave already. And of course, the uncle's son says, you and your mom were actually aiming for uncle's property, right? That is karma. And oh gosh, this guy really is a brat. He then says, your family is all the same. You're just dogs that bark. And our MC looks very furious here, and his eyes glow blue with veins coming out of his cheeks. He says, take that back. But of course, this ugly dude with pink hair or red hair just says, did it hit the bullseye? Come at me, you trash. And of course, his uncle just says very proudly, what's with that face? You're gonna hit somebody older than you? But boom, our MC punches the uncle right there after he is smiling. And of course, he gets sent flying past his son. And then of course, his son goes to attack our MC with an alcohol bottle, but he kicks him so hard that his body literally bends up and he gets sent flying towards the window. Of course, he says, I'll report you. You made the first move. And our MC says, do what you want. And the uncle mentions, that guy really came at us, and this really hurts. Our MC though, he mentions that during the second incoming Deep Abyss attack, the world will change. So of course, until the current judicial system changes, let's try not to cause any more problems. Our MC then says, but I'll avenge my mom and my dad, no matter what. We then see our MC is literally coming out of his room. I thought he left the house actually. He says, I'll let you have this for 3 days. Do what you want. And they look at each other like, what? This guy just gave up the house? And of course, he pinches his cheeks to see if it's true. Of course, his son then says, give Chief Kato a call, Dad. This dude is looking down on us. Our MC is now at a hotel and he says he wants a king room for 2 nights. And the lady is smoking, and of course she mentions, are you here to run away? Our massage service here is super popular. Wanna give it a try? Of course he blushes and he says, I'm okay, because I know he knows what comes with that. She then begins to touch on his hand, but he pulls it away. And he says, it's fine really. And she mentions, room 208. That is your floor number. We then arrive and oh my gosh, he's getting dirty images anyway. He then screams and yells and rolls around. Because of course, that's what's happening in the next room beside him. He says, don't think about it as he puts his pillow in his head. And we see right here, yeah, this is absolutely infuriating. We are then in another room and we see this girl saying, shut up. And of course, one of the ladies with with white hair, she looks really cool by the way. She says, Sakura-sama, this is the closest hotel of our objective, so please have patience. But she says it is quite annoying. She then asks her, what do you think about it, Mio? And she says, according to her voice and breathing, she seems to be faking it. And she gets up saying, what are you saying, Mio? I'm talking about the abandoned construction site, and yeah, this girl really is funny. She says, please say it clearly next time. Of course, Mio then says, the world really has changed. And from now on, they really have to defeat these mysterious and evil monsters. Says she will protect her, of course, and then we go back to the other conversation and Mio says, see, that was exactly 10 seconds, and Sakura-sama just doesn't know what's going on. He says, you better stop that, and I guess she finally got it, and yeah, that's a bit late though. The chapter starts and this is 2 days later and it is currently 30 minutes before midnight and we see they're at the site. Of course, we see Takedo tell Sota, hey Sota, don't you feel that? And he's wearing a pretty cool jacket, but he's still shivering. Of course, Sota mentions, the likes of stage 2 beasts aren't my match. Just stay and watch behind me. Of course, Taketa is kind of confused here and he says, are you kind of sure you can defeat them? He says, if anything goes wrong, I'll use you at decoy and run. Oh gosh, and our MC says, yeah, just leave it to me. Of course, he says, are we still friends? And yeah, he says, of course, as he folds his arms, saying cheerfully, of course we are. Our MC looks at his phone and he says 30 more seconds. He then, of course, his friend asks, won't there be other people who want to defeat monsters? And our MC mentions, In the novel Who Want to Defeat Monsters, well, other people didn't appear yet, so of course this is going to be his. He then looks to the side, and he says, "Don't scare me like that," but we see two people. Of course, that's Hanashima Sakura, and it is their classmate. They then begin to wonder as they are behind a corner, and he says, "Impossible, these people weren't there in the novel." He says, "I get it now. Of course, it's not that nobody got the reward here, they were actually done in by the abyssal monsters." We then see Mio tells Sakura, "I'm here, so let's go." And Takeda mentions, well, the lady next to her is probably part of the special force, so she should be safe, but are they going to steal the reward? But our MC mentions, even if they're girls, I won't let them have the rewards just like that, and W, our boy, is a Sigma. Of course, we then see Sakura, and she looks and they're standing in front of this huge space. She mentions, "Are monsters really gonna come out of this number?" as there's a huge 2 on the floor. Mio inspects it, and she says, "Yes, monsters will appear out of this," and it's sort of like a magic circle. And of course, she sets up a destructive bomb that will leave them just on the verge for death. And of course, Sakura has to do the finishing blow as she hands her a pistol. She then says as she clucks it back, "Alright, I got it." And they are literally on top of the building looking down. And of course, Takeda mentions, "It's gotten kind of scary." We then see Mio. She says, "I'll do it." And here we go, she's setting up the bomb. Our MC mentions they're really using a bomb as a weapon. For as far as I can tell, they haven't acquired any skills. But he then smiles, saying, "Either way, I just need to defeat them." Of course, she has a bomb ready. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. We then see the magic circle appears, and we see that black and red evil energy come out of there. And of course, there's 2 of them. And they mentioned, "That's really lucky." She then says, of course, that it was lucky, but it's actually unfortunate, and she lets the bomb explode. And of course, Mio smiles, saying, "Please finish them off." But they aren't affected in the slightest. Mio is like, "What the heck? He's not even uninjured?" But Sakura mentions that one of them is down. Oh gosh, it's that stupid monkey, just look at him dead, or at least injured. The big gorilla King Kong then rushes at them, and they begin to shoot at him, bow, bow, bow. And of course, we then see the smoke coming out of the muzzle of the gun, and she's sweating because it seemed to do no damage. She then says, "Sakura, run away." And oh gosh, let's see if they make it out of here alive. King Kong then punches them, and of course they manage to dodge by just a hair, and he literally destroys the ground. And he has a piece of course, rock from the ground, and he throws one at Mio, and she falls to the ground, saying, before she passes out, "Sakura-sama, you need to run." We then see the King Kong about to crush her head in, but then we hear, bang, and we see a huge mark indented in his chest, and yes, our MC just swooped in to save Sakura, but then he starts with his hand quivering. Oh wow, that actually did hurt. And Sakura looks at him like, oh my gosh, and Mio then goes over to Sakura to make sure she is alright. Of course, our MC says, "Hurry up and go. You guys cannot defeat that." And then Sakura mentions, "Seiju Sota, why are you here?" And he says, "More importantly, that's not what matters. Get away from here right now." The gorilla then pounces on him, and our MC blocks it, and boom, he sends the gorilla flying from literally spinning his body. He then says that even with 10 times his physical strength, he's only on par with this gorilla, so he needs something to end this quickly. He then brings out his sword from his inventory, and the gorilla is like, wait a second, what is that? We then see him rush in like he is Sung Jin-woo from Solo Leveling, and slice, he cuts him where he punched him previously, and he even gets right behind him like he's Killua. And yes, this goblin has been killed. System notification. Human number 1, you have subjugated a stage 2 abyssal monster. And we see the monster right here, and of course his body dissipates, and we see a slingshot as well as another crystal floating orb. Our MC then says, "When are you coming down? Hurry up." And of course Takedo is like, "How the heck am I supposed to get down here, dude? What are you saying?" And of course we just see, guys, it's Mio and Sakura just watching. He then falls down, of course, and his soul left his body from the sheer speed of our MC pulling him down there, and he says, "Go there and finish it." And he is talking about the monkey. Sakura then approaches him, and she says, "Shiju-kun, thank you for helping right now." And Mio even thanks him for saving Sakura. She then says, "We'll offer you unbelievably good conditions," because they want the monster to be handed over to Sakura. He then has a sword out, and he says, "I was the one who brought those guys down. You should finish the other one." Of course, he then finishes his gorilla slice, and yes, he has finished the stage 2 abyssal monster, and even gets a revolver or something. Let's go, guys, and this weapon looks pretty cool. Of course, our MC's friend says, this guy won't move anymore, right? And of course, Mio says, Shiju-kun, we shall meet again. She also says that next time, can you support us as well? And he begins to think, because of course, he doesn't know if he should. She says they will reward him with anything, and he says, I'll think about it, so please leave quickly. She then says, if you have made up your mind, please contact Sakura. And I'm guessing Sakura is going to be one of our MC's cute little waifu. He then takes a pill because of course he wants him to eat the stone, and as he takes it, we then see his body start to surge with the black and red aura, soul of the lone wolf. It seems like of course that his abilities have increased. He mentions that it increased by 10%, and he says, Takedo, what is your skill? Of course he says, well, it's actually the eagle eye, and it seems that the furthest distance I can see has reached 2 kilometers, and he scratches his head saying, it doesn't seem that useful. But our MC elbows him and he says, hey, that's actually a great one, dude. And of course Takedo is kind of happy now. He then says, that's their gun, it's suitable for you. And oh yes, our MC got the Assault of Flames level 1. Oh wow, it says here that the effective range is 500 meters, and it grants fire attributed attacks equal to 10% of your physical strength, but it increases your movement speed by 10% at the same time, and also has a fire elemental bullet which can stockpile 5 shots. He says this is pretty good, and he looks over to Takedo, and Takedo says, my weapon has precision, and oh wow. He says that he will always hit a target if it's in his line of sight. Wow, this is actually OP. And of course, the attack power of every 5th shot is increased by 10% of his max vitality. He then says that's absolutely amazing. And of course, he thanks him because it's all thanks to Sota. They then put their arms around each other and he says, well, tomorrow the day will be changed, or the world will be changed as well. And of course, Takedo he literally just says, yep, this world is ours now. Well, let's see about that. We then see Mio driving, and she says, my deepest apologies. Because of me, the skills are. But then, we see Sakura sleeping here, and Mio says Sakura's classmate is called Soju Sota, and he wants to run a background check on him. She then says that she gives off a sigh of relief. Shiju Sota, who exactly are you? And our boy definitely is becoming a mystery. He then sits, of course, on his bed in the hotel, and then we hear those, let's just say they're weird sounds over there in the other room. And of course, Takedo asks, are you really staying in this hotel? He says, I've gotten used to it already, so you should also suck it up. Takedo then mentions, I have 10,000 yen right now, but how about you? He mentions, I still have a bit more, but currencies will soon lose their meaning. And then, I don't know why Takedo is literally smiling as if he wants to spend it right now. And our MC says, no, I won't allow you to call for one. Of course, we hear delivery, and our MC goes up in there, and he opens it, and we see the food there, but somebody's leaving, and it seems to be a lady in a red dress. There's kind of an awkward silence as they look at each other, and our MC goes back inside, and he says that was really close. But then he mentions that tomorrow at 8 AM the sun will disappear too, and so instead of their sun, a green-colored sun will appear, and it was also called the Emerald Sun, and this would honestly be a pretty cool thing to see in real life, but definitely not forever. Of course, he mentions that when it does appear, the world will be dyed in green, and they will hear a voice that says, the earth is in the control of the abyss. They mentions that finally, every nation will take it seriously after that moment, and when the 3rd and 4th transfer zones appears, humans holding powerful skills will reveal themselves, as we see them right here, and I'm really hyped to see all the different abilities that people will receive. He says that there will also be a new thing called a Special Response Team, and also with the cooperations of scientists, new weapons to counter abyssal monsters will be invented, which this is honestly such a cool thing to witness. But then he says, humanity couldn't win. Even advanced weapons couldn't oppose these abyssal monsters. So this makes me wonder how exactly they're going to win. We then see both of them eating, and Takedo says there's not many out there with powers like ours, right? He then asks, how would you rank me in the strength? Our MC then begins to eat a takoyaki, and of course he says, well, there's about 200 ability users, so I guess you would be at least 30. But then he, of course, Takedo says, wait, I'm 30? I'm really one of the 30 strongest rankers in the world? And he even drops his food on his chopsticks. But their MC froze, and he said, I'll be right back. And of course, we then see Takedo says in his head, I'm certain of it, Sota is a reincarnator, But he cries and he says, why wasn't it me? We then see he is at the counter of the hotel, and of course he's looking for, a stylish and beautiful woman. And the lady says, yeah, she's not one of ours. She then says, I have no idea why she comes here, since she can definitely earn much more at a nicer place. He then says, that's who I'm looking for. And she says, wait, you know her? And of course, he says, which room is she staying in? She mentions, I can't divulge information about her customers, but then of course he puts a lot of cash on and she's absolutely shocked. And she says, in room 502. He then says, don't tell anybody I told you this. And he says, of course I won't, and I really appreciate this. He then goes to the 5th floor on the elevator and he mentions that this world has 12 ability users known as the 12 stars, as we see him right here. And wow, they look absolutely frightening and also cute and cool, but mainly you can tell that they aren't ordinary. He says that each of them are strong enough to destroy an entire city by themselves. And of course, he says they're known as the 12 stars because a woman among them has the ability, Destroyer of Scorpio. We then see a lady here with a scorpion tail, and he says that she's one of the 5 strongest among them, and her name was never mentioned, but her personal history and past were. He says that she would have a tattoo of a rose on her back. Unfortunately though, she used to whip men, and I don't know if this is like a hobby or whatever, but let's just say that she used to hurt men. He says that usually she had a room where she holds the men, and of course a rose tattoo and an adult job, so that lady that he saw was most likely Scorpio. He then says even if he is right, what should I tell her, as he's behind this door. We then see she opens up the door, and she mentions, you're the guy from earlier, and she says in a very weird manner. He's kind of taken aback, and he says sorry for showing up unannounced. She then wonders if he followed her here, and he says I didn't, but then she says, I charge 5 for a round. He says that's not what I meant, and so he dashed away. She mentioned that something is odd about that kid, and it seems like she can't stay there any longer. He is then on the bed with Taketo literally snoring his snores out, and her MC says to himself, whatever, let's just sleep tonight. It is 7:59 a.m. and of course Taketo asks, can I go back to sleep? But our MC's looking out the window like he's Batman scouting over Gotham. We then see Taketo, and he says a sun. No way, as we see something green forming in the sky. Everything in the bottom turns green, and this kid even rubs his eyes saying, are my eyes tired? The sun just turned green. And everybody stops from what they're doing, and they say, what in the world is going on? And if I really told you, well, you guys wouldn't believe it. The chapter starts and we see that girl from earlier, and she's yawning because of course another guy even woke her up in the night, and she's holding a very big briefcase, and I wonder what's in there. She then notices that the sun is green, and so she lifts her hand up to touch it. But then, just at that moment, she sees a Scorpio, which is a constellation I'm guessing, and then she falls to the ground, but nobody notices because they're all looking at the sun. The MC then says, brace yourself to Taketo, and we hear the voice, brace yourself, you filthy foolish trash. I think some of you have already received our gift. Now some of you possess abilities far other and far surpassing the normal humans. We then see an evil face with very sharp teeth come out of the sky, and he says, let this little game begin. Earthlings versus the abyssal monsters. This will be called the Abyssal War. He says that the humans, if they do defeat us abyssal monsters, we shall grant you powers surpassing humanity, and of course abysses shall appear all over Earth. We see Sakura and Mio, and then he says 999 abyss portals shall appear in the worlds 1 to 99. And we see some of the awakeners on top of buildings, and this guy has a blue fire, I'm guessing because he just lit up his cigarette with it. And of course the guy says from each portal a random number of abyssal monsters between 1 and 9 shall appear. And we see a lady here, and she has maids behind him, as the guy continues to say, you humans win if you manage to defeat every last abyssal monsters, and you will lose when we have devoured the last living thing on Earth. He then is still in the middle of the sky, and he says, I've talked for too long. Games are more interesting the less is known. And so he disappears, and he wishes everybody a good fight. And just like that, that purple evil energy face is completely gone from the sky, and it looks very ethereal. We then hear humanity is going to win in the end, right? And of course, it is Taketo talking to our MC. But our MC can't say anything, because from what he remembers, no, it was never like that. He then says, if it's us, I'm sure we can win. And of course, Taketo says, if it's us? We then see we are in some sort of meeting room, and of course, these are the country no veils. This old guy says, everything you just heard is true. Earth has become a playground for these unknown creatures. One guy then smashes his fist on the ground like no creature on this world would survive the flames. And of course, this guy mentions, let the army solve this. He says that we cannot defeat them without sacrificing civilians, and that must make the most sense. Somebody then says, according to our reports, small firearms were harmless against them, even a class 2 abyssal monster. And this is Ito Ryota, and he says we have no idea if any firearms will work. And the other guy then says, what do you want us to do then? The guy then mentions, how about we establish a super squad? We'll gather the people with superhuman abilities to fight against these abyssal monsters. He then argues it's not a bad idea, but how do we recruit these people? And can I really count on you? He then says yes, the people will descend into chaos and unrest when they learn the truth, and so you need to keep peace. They then say yes sir, as they all stand up in reverence. We then see our MC and the people running away in terror, and of course, Takedo says, what should we do now? The MC mentions the nation will soon establish a super squad to fight these abyssal monsters. And Takedo says, are we going to join them? He says no, they will fight as mercenaries. Because he mentions the book's protagonist lost his freedom and chances to get rewarded by joining the government. And this is why they will only participate as mercenaries. He says joining would offer better conditions, but our freedom would be too limited, and then they wonder where they're headed. Of course, our MC says, first I have to take care of some business, and then we will train for the weeks until the next appearance of the dungeon. He then says, your business, is it your uncle, you know? And he asks if I can take care of it. And it seems like your boy is definitely a really good friend, and he really is quick to catch on to things. Of course, our MC doesn't know what to say, but then Takedo says, don't worry, I'll be on your side, but don't become a criminal now, because they will become the heroes to save the Earth. We then see his uncle and his son. Guys, look at them. They're literally making a mess again. They have Coke bottles, and guys, it went from alcohol to Coke. Yeah, these guys really are just cooked. The son then says, Soto should have given us the house sooner. That dude really is trash. Uncle says to enjoy the moment, and of course, we even have more booze. But just at that second, we see that his son's throat was sliced, and he says he's dead. And we see our MC with a dagger in his hand. He says, you are next. And of course, his uncle says, you're committing a crime. You murderer. You murderer. He says, I'm your uncle, dude. You're making a mistake, aren't we, family? And our MC gets furious and his eyes turn red, saying, aren't you the one who stole from my mom when she was alive and drove her to an early grave for the inheritance? And even after she died, you only came to the place where I belonged. You took everything. The uncle is crying, and he says, really, in a last hope, in a last-ditch effort to hang on to his life, I'll give you everything I have. I'll tell you a secret. It's something you want to know. And our MC is literally turning into Song Jin-woo with his dagger, and he says, forgive you. I'm going to make you meet the same fate. He then says, I know who killed Nissan. Wait, I thought that was a car. Anyway, guessing that is the name of their MC's mother. He then says, I know you killed your mom. And then our MC's eyes start to glow blue. And he says, and who was that? He then says, it was Chief Kato's nephew. He was drunk, driving, and he hit your mom. And of course he says, and why would you know that? He mentions that him and the chief were drinking together. And of course, it seems like he was only getting money because he's been blackmailing him. Our MC, of course, then says, so, that's it, huh? Why wouldn't the police investigate it? He then says as he tries to run away, I told you everything, just don't kill me. And the uncle thinks he's getting away, but he's already been stabbed at the back because our MC is so fast. Takedo arrives at the door and he seems, oh gosh, he sees the body. Our MC mentions a lot of people are going to die soon. Act like you didn't see anything. And our MC says, we'll be training your eagle eye for the next weeks, so of course you need to go pack. They then are packed up with the North Face strip on them in the room, and the MC asks if he's ready, and Takedo says yeah, as they bump fists together. We then see Mio and Sakura, and of course Mio is talking about how they did not expect Shiju Sota to cooperate with them, but it seems like of course Sakura will get a skill. Mio mentions, I did everything I could to look into him, but found nothing unusual. The only thing of note was some problematic relatives. They are then driving, and of course Sakura spots them, but then they see, wait, who the heck is that? As somebody is leaning against a wall. And this guy looks absolutely awesome, and I wonder just who this is. And if I had to guess, well, I'm gonna say it's Takeda if he dressed well and he cut off some of his hair.